So yesterday we talked about converting our units between the metric system. King Henry died unexpectedly drinking chocolate milk. So our kilos, hectas, decas, our units, which we said were grams, which measured mass, liters, which measured volume, and then meters, which measured our distance. And then we went on through to decis, centis, and millis. So that was, remember, King Henry died unexpectedly drinking chocolate milk, which was real easy. We just move our decimal because these are all base 10 problems. Now, we also went back to the English system yesterday. In our English system, we did things like converting feet into miles, or we did turning seconds eventually into days, but we talked about we don't know how many seconds there are in a day. So when we do this, seconds first must turn into minutes, minutes then must turn into hours, then hours could turn into days. So using all of these knowledges that we have from yesterday, we're going to build on that today, and we're going to convert two things at the same time. So instead of just going from seconds into days, now we're going to take miles per hour and convert that into feet per second. So we're making two unit conversions all at the same time. So as we go through this, the first thing that we need to know is that we got some definitions that we need to look at, right? So if we're going to use this to convert from a one unit of measure to another, we're going to use a rate. And a rate is simply going to be a ratio that compares quantities in different measures. So how do we convert from our English system that we use in America to the metric system, which is used in every other country of the world? We're going to start by creating a ratio. Remember, ratio is just going to be some kind of fancy word for a fraction. This is why we set up everything in a fraction yesterday, to prepare us for today. So for each of these things, you should see the word per. Examples: miles per hour, feet per second, kilometers per hour. And every time that we set these up, that's just going to mean divide. So the word that comes after per will be my denominator every single time. This first one, miles per hour, feet per second, kilometers per hour. So as we go through here, we've been using 1 as our denominator as a placeholder for the beginning of every problem. Now we're going to have to change that up. We're still going to be using 1, but it's going to be 1 in a certain unit that we need to look at as well. Okay, so if we look at this first example, we have how many feet per second is equivalent to 60 miles per hour. Well, we need to create two of these roadmaps that we talked about yesterday. The first thing we need to ask ourselves is what's given? Is the feet per second given to us, or is that what I'm trying to find? And in this case, my miles per hour is what's given. So I'm going to start with the miles, my first part of my roadmap. And we know that miles are trying to convert into feet. We do know that we can go straight from miles to feet, so that's good. And then we can look at our denominator. We have hours that need to turn into seconds. Well, we can't go straight from hours to seconds, so we need to create these different steps in our roadmap. Hours must first convert into minutes, and after minutes, then we can convert into seconds. Now I'm going to add an extra little piece here, because we'll need that. So we start with what is given. And we said that what was given was 60 miles per, so divided by 1 hour. At this point, it is a choice for you. Which unit do you want to get rid of first? Now remember, in order to get rid of it, we have to think about John Travolta and Staying Alive. If something's in the numerator, to get rid of it, it must go to the denominator. If something's in the denominator, to get rid of it, it must go to the numerator. So for this one, let's just start with getting rid of our miles. We see here that miles is in the numerator, so to get rid of it, miles must go to the denominator. We can follow our roadmap to see that miles must turn into feet. Well, then we ask ourselves, which one of these units is larger? Well, miles are larger, therefore they get the 1 value to go with it. And then you have to ask yourself, how many feet are in a mile? Well, there are 5,280 feet in a mile. So if we look here, I can say, yes, I've gotten rid of my miles. Those cancel out. And I'm at feet, which is where I want to be. So I'm going to check here. Now I got to focus in on the hours. Well, notice that hours were in the denominator. So to get rid of an hour that's in the denominator, it must now go to the numerator. And I can follow my roadmap. Hours have to turn into minutes. Well, you ask yourself, which one of these two units are larger? Is it an hour or is it a minute? Well, an hour is larger. And then you ask yourself, how many minutes are there in an hour? There are 60. So now I'm at minutes in the denominator. To get rid of them, they must go to the numerator. Okay, and if I follow my roadmap, minutes turn into seconds. So here, which is larger, a minute or a second? A minute is the larger unit, and there are 60 seconds in a minute. At this point, I'm at where I need to be. If I want to go back and check, I had, not feet. So go through and check to make sure that we have all our units. We had hours that canceled out hours, minutes that cancel out minutes. We're left with seconds, so we're in a happy spot. At this point, we want to just put this into our calculator. So we take our numerator, which is 60 times 5,280 times 1 times 1. We're going to divide that by 1 times 1 times 60 times 60. And so you take a second and plug that into your calculator. So you take some time to plug this into your calculator. Remember, you can pause this video and take time to do that if your answers think your answers come out too quickly. We get 88. Now remember, if you do not give me a unit of measure, I'm going to assume we're talking about gummy bears here. So my final unit of measure that I'm looking for is feet per second. I can see that here. So I want to make sure that I put feet per second also with my answer. So as we continue forward, we're now going to look at yet another example. We have Hog Mountain Road as a speed limit of 45 miles per hour directly outside of Oconee County High School. What is this speed in feet per second? So again, as we get ready to set up our roadmap, because that's going to be most important, I'm given miles per hour. So I know that miles is going to have to turn into something and that hours are going to have to turn into something. So as I keep reading, in feet per second. So miles were turned into feet. And again, we do know that direct conversion. But then my hours is going to have to turn into seconds. So I can't go straight from hours down to seconds. I have to go from hours to minutes and from minutes to seconds. Please remember that I'm going to give you all of these conversion factors. So how many seconds are in a minute, how many minutes are in an hour, how many hours in a day, so forth. That is not something that I'm going to expect you to memorize. So if you're having trouble remembering that, just remember it will be provided. So we always start with what's given in the box first. They told me 45 miles per, so divided by 1 hour. And again, it is completely up to you. We started the last one by getting rid of miles first. So just to show you another way of doing this, we're going to start by getting rid of our hours first. Hours were in the denominator, so to remove them, they need to go to the numerator. According to my list, hours have to turn into minutes. Then you ask yourself, which one of these two units is larger, an hour or a minute? An hour is bigger, so how many minutes are there in an hour? There is 60. Now if I look at my roadmap, I'm still not finished, so I'm at minutes. I got to get rid of them, so they go to the numerator. And then they must turn into seconds. So we ask ourselves which one is larger. Minutes are larger, and there are 60 seconds in a minute. So if I can look, if I want to go back and check, I had hours, I got rid of hours. I had minutes, I got rid of minutes. I'm left with seconds. That's what we wanted, so we're good. Now I can just kind of pretend like all this isn't here, because I need to go back and try and get rid of my miles. And if we look, our miles is in the numerator, so to get rid of it, it must go to the denominator. I follow my roadmap. Miles must turn into feet. You ask yourself, which one of these is larger? Well, a mile is larger, and there are 5,280 feet in a mile. I can check my road map because, yes, it looks like I'm at the end. Miles to miles, yes, I'm left with feet. So that's nice and happy. At this point, I just need to multiply. So in my numerator, I have 45 times 1 times 1 times 5,280. And in my denominator, I have 1 times 60 times 60 times 1. And again, I don't really need this part that we just wrote out because you're just putting that into the calculator. You've shown your work for me over here. So take a second, type this into your calculator. So once you take some time to type this into your calculator, again, if you need more time, you can pause the video here. You will get 66. Now just don't forget about what my final unit of measure should be. If you don't put it, I'm going to assume gummy bears and you'll lose points. So it is 66 feet per second that we're looking for here. All right, so we're at a time where you can try this one. Now notice there's a little bit different here. Instead of just miles per hour, I have kilometers, but those kilometers are turning into meters. So take a second, press pause right now on the video, try and work this out on your own. And when you get finished with it, hit play again. Okay, so as we go through, we have an eastern gray kangaroo can run at approximately 64 kilometers per hour. What is the speed in meters per second? Well, don't freak out. We still want to start by drawing our road map. I have kilometers, and I want to change kilometers into meters. Well, right away, we don't have to think about trying to do too many conversions. I can go straight into King Henry. So King Henry died unexpectedly drinking chocolate milk. I'm starting here at kilometers. I'm going down here to meters right here. Not millimeters, but meters. So I'm moving my decimal 1, 2, 3 times to the right. Okay. So if I start with that, 64 kilometers, and I move my decimal 1, 2, 3 times to the right, I am left with 64,000 meters. Okay. That's the first part. The second part is when we take hours and we need to convert those hours into seconds. Well, I can't go straight from hours down to seconds, so I have to first convert hours into minutes, and then I must convert my minutes into seconds. So if I start where I am at right now, I have 64,000 meters per 1 hour. Because I started with the first conversion, now I'm going back to the second one. Well, I need to convert my hours into minutes. Well, hours were in the denominator, so to get rid of them, hours must go to the numerator. And according to my roadmap, they turn into minutes. Well, which one of these two things is bigger? An hour is bigger, and there are 60 minutes in an hour. Just don't forget that I'm not done yet. I'm only here at minutes, so I also must convert my minutes into seconds. Minutes were in the denominator, so they must go to the numerator, and they're going to turn into seconds. Which one of these two things are bigger? A minute's bigger, and there are 60 seconds in a minute. At this point, we check our roadmap. Meters, seconds, we're good. So all we have to do now is type this into our calculator. So we have 64,000 times 1 times 1 divided by 1 times 60 times 60. So go ahead and hit pause while you type this into your calculator. And don't let your answer freak you out when you get this one. It is going to come out as a decimal. Remember, we live in the real world, not the perfect utopian society. So as you calculate this, hopefully you are finding 17.7 repeating. So I'm going to round that to 78. And then don't forget our final units of measure, which are meters per second. You can write this out, or you could just do 17.78 meters per second. However you decide to do this is completely fine. Okay, as we move on to example 4, Greg's car is traveling at approximately 125 feet per second. How many miles per hour is he traveling? Now this one we have to be careful of. what's given to me is different this time. So I'm given feet, and that has to turn into miles. And I'm also given seconds, and that has to turn into hours. So as we set up our roadmap, again, we start at feet. We're fortunate we do know how many feet are in a mile, so we can make that straight conversion. And then when we look at our seconds to hours, unfortunately, we can't go straight from seconds into hours, so seconds must turn into minutes, which then turns into an hour. So we set up the problem of what's given, 125 feet per, so divided by 1 second. And then you just have to choose which unit of measure do you want to get rid of first. I'm going to say let's get rid of the feet first. Feet are in the numerator, so to get rid of them, they must go to the denominator. And according to my map, feet are turning into miles. So miles are bigger, it gets the 1, and there are 5,280 feet in a mile. Now I can go down to my seconds. So I have seconds that are in the denominator. To get rid of them, they must move to the numerator. According to my roadmap, seconds turn into minutes. I ask myself which is larger. A minute's larger, 60 seconds in a minute. Now I'm not done, I'm only at minutes, and I have to go all the way to hours. So minutes is in the denominator. It must go to the numerator. And according to my map, minutes turn into hours. Which one of these two is larger? An hour is larger, and there are 60 minutes in an hour. So as I go through, I check, I'm where I need to be. All I have to do now is type this into my calculator. So 125 times 1 times 60 times 60, and that whole thing is going to be divided by 1 times 5,280 times 1 times 1. So take a second, hit pause here, and type this into your calculator. And again, when you type this into your calculator, it's not going to be a perfect world. Therefore, if you get a decimal, that is okay. When you type this in, you actually get 85.227. We're going to round that to 85.23. Just do some rounding here. And don't forget that my last unit of measure is miles per hour. You could also write it as 85.23 miles per hour, or if you wanted to write out each one using words, that would be fine too. Now what we've been doing has been converting English to English, metric to metric. What's going to happen if I need to convert from the English system to the metric system, or vice versa, from the metric system back to the English system? Or how much does my luggage weigh in pounds versus how much does my luggage weigh in kilograms? So you will be provided with this list of common English to metric, metric to English conversions with their conversion rate. All you have to do is know how to use it. So just like yesterday when we talked about sumo wrestlers and babies, if we were going to ask some sumo wrestlers to come into my classroom and we're going to stack them from the ceiling all the way down to the floor and from wall to wall, just try and fill up the room, I'm not going to need as many sumo wrestlers as I would need as fresh infant babies, because babies are much smaller than sumo wrestlers. So you have to ask yourself, am I moving to the right? Am I going from a larger unit to a smaller unit? Or am I moving to the left, a smaller unit to a larger unit? So just like in King Henry, when we move to the right, we talked about what we do when moving to the right is we multiply to find our answers. So for instance, if I were to start at kilograms and I wanted to convert into pounds, I would multiply by 2.20. If I'm moving to the left, meaning I'm starting at a smaller unit here, let's say kilometers, and I want to change this into the larger unit of miles, I am going to divide by my factor, which in this case would be 1.61. Okay, so the main things to remember at this point is if I'm moving to the right, so if I start on the left-hand side and I'm converting it to something on the right-hand side, I'm going to multiply by the conversion factor given. If I start on the right side and I move, or I'm converting to a factor on the left side, I need to divide by the number that's given. All right, so let's look at some examples. I'm at inches, so I need to go through my list, find inches on my chart, and I'm moving to centimeters. And when I find that, I can see that I'm moving to the right, so I know that I need to multiply. So I'm going this way. Therefore, I need to multiply by the number that's given, which is 2.54. So 16 times 2.54, and that's going to give me my answer in centimeters. Which would be 40.64 centimeters. For part B, I'm looking at pounds, and I'm converting those pounds into kilograms. Well, pounds are on the right side of my chart, and I'm converting those into my kilograms, which means I'm going to divide. So I take 345, and I'm going to divide that by the value that's given, which is 2.20. And I get 156.82. The reason I get 82, it's actually 81 repeating. The 8's going to tell the 1 to round up. Okay, so if we look at part C here, I'm at kilometers, and I'm trying to turn those into miles. Well, kilometers is on the right side of my chart, and I'm moving to miles, which means I am converting, going to the left, or I'm dividing. So I take 450, and I'm going to divide by the number that's provided there, 1.61. Where I get 279.50. For D, I'm starting at milliliters. Milliliters are on the right side of my chart, and I'm converting them to fluid ounces. So yet again, I'm going to divide by the number that's given. I know that there are 29.58 milliliters in a fluid ounce. So I divide by that. Where I get 40.57. For letter E, I'm starting at meters, which is going to be on the left side of my chart, and I'm converting them into feet. So I'm moving to the right, which means I multiply. So I take 40 and I multiply it by the conversion, which is 3.28. So 40 meters is equivalent to 131.2 feet. All right, I'm given 4 gallons here, and I'm converting those to liters. Well, gallons is on the right, left side of my chart, and I'm moving to the right, which means I multiply. So I take 4, and I multiply it by 3.79. Where I get 15.16 liters. So now you have time to try these 3 examples on your own. So part A, B, and C, for example 6, I want you to try. Hit pause on the video, try them on your paper, and then when you're ready, hit play to check your answers. So if we look, Penny has a pencil that is 19 centimeters long. We have centimeters. How many inches is that? Well, I'm starting at centimeters, which is actually on the right side of my chart, and I'm converting that to inches, which means I'm moving to the left, which means dividing. So 19 divided by 2.54. Take a second, you type that into your calculator. You get that is equivalent to 7.48 inches. And again, it's not going to be perfect, therefore we just do some rounding. We have Macho Mike that can lift 200 kilograms with ease. How many pounds can he lift? Well, kilograms is going to be on the left side of our chart, and therefore we are moving to pounds, so therefore we're going to the right side of our chart, which means we multiply. So I'm given 200 kilograms, and I'm multiplying that by the conversion factor, of 2.20. So Macho Mike can actually lift 440 pounds. Please don't forget these units of measure. That is very, very important. So for the last one, the distance between Athens and Atlanta is 65 miles. We want to turn that into kilometers. Well, miles is on the left side of our chart, and we're moving to the right side for kilometers, which means we multiply. So we have 65 times 1.61, which tells me that Athens and Atlanta are 104.65 kilometers